Growing up, I wasn't the best student. Case in point. Let me use an example to illustrate this. So, I'm at a college fair accompanying my friends, and the college I'd be accepted to had a booth there. And as we're standing there, one of my old teachers comes up to me, puts his arm on my shoulder and goes, "Daryl, how did they let you in?" It was a joke, I hope. But that's besides the point. Since then, I've grown a lot. This was me 2 weeks ago, where I was selected to be a delegate at the UN Youth Assembly in New York. Now, since my days of coming to school late, not handing in homework, being stubborn and annoying in general, I've matured. I've learned to be more responsible, less annoying, less stubborn, and more compassionate. And I also began to think about how I wanted to best live my life. And I realized that I wanted to better the lives of those around me, to solve big problems, if you will. And it was also here that I began to realize that education had changed my attitude, and education has the power to change lives. But it was also here that I realized that education was so underrated as a problem solver. Now I want you to begin to think of how we begin to solve today's biggest problems, be it environmental or socio-economic. We tend to solve them by instituting large policy changes, drafting new laws, implementing new policies. Some good examples include the Geneva Convention regarding conduct of warfare, the Kyoto Protocols dealing with climate change, and the travel ban. I didn't mean to leave that out there. The travel ban dealing with extremism and terrorism. And the unifying theme here is that all these attempt to solve the problem from a top-down approach. And look at how well that's worked out for us. Global temperatures continue to rise, even though governments set carbon emissions targets. Our safest cities are savaged by acts of terror, even though states run large surveillance programs. And you begin to think, where did it all go wrong? And it's simple. We are implementing these top-down approaches, expecting mindsets and lifestyles to change overnight. But how can we do so if we're educating the youth of today with the ethos of yesterday? Instituting new rules and regulations doesn't give us a deeper understanding of these problems and the changes that need to take place, merely a guideline to follow. People need to understand the changes that take place and support them. And this is how a critical mass of educated individuals fit in. Because what we need is not just a small group of policymakers, scientists, and politicians dictating how we solve our problems. What we need is a large pool of well-educated youth that can collectively and collaboratively come up with innovative solutions. And this education will provide this exact critical mass of intelligent young men and women. I want to take a look at climate change to begin with because we all know it's a hoax by the Chinese. Okay, I'm kidding, but it's an extremely urgent issue that, if we leave unattended, could lead to an unimaginable trail of destruction. 22.5 million. That is the amount of people displaced by inclement weather, not even accounting for the amount of lives ruined and destroyed due to conflict exacerbated by climate change. And in order to combat this, last year, we signed the largest binding deal since the Kyoto Protocols, the Paris Agreements, during which we attempted to limit temperature rises and curb carbon emissions all around the world. And yet, despite this big world-altering declaration, only 61% of the world believes in global warming, and an even lesser 55% believes it is caused by human activity. What this shows us is that the top-down approach has failed in changing mindsets, let alone in form. And this can be pegged down to one simple reason: the lack of a climate change and environmental education. And we don't need to look very far for the two largest culprits of this. Any guesses? They contribute to over a third of global CO2 emissions. China and the US. In these two countries, there's no official framework or curriculum to deal with climate change or the environment. Rather, we leave the job of educating our youth on the largest planetary emergency of our generation up to the individual whims and fancies of schools and teachers. In China, a country of over 1 billion people, 14 schools, just 14 schools, have only recently adopted a climate change education framework. How can we begin to solve tomorrow's problems if our youth of today aren't educated adequately? And this is why we need to start educating on the importance of environment. In doing so, we are providing youth with the right skills and knowledge to tackle these problems as our future leaders. And this is so crucial at a young age to fundamentally alter their behaviors and attitudes towards being more ecologically responsible, to help the youth see themselves as part of a larger global citizenry. And this is especially crucial in developing nations, where we need to teach youth that economic growth, patterned along the lines of the industrial era before us, is simply no longer sustainable without dire consequences. We need to teach them to be conscious of sustainability so that they can learn to operate their businesses and economies with sustainable practices. And around the world, there's already evidence of the powerful effect of education. Let's take a look at Sweden. So over there, they provide an innovative and demanding curriculum delivered through the biological sciences and the social studies. And this innovative and wholesome approach to the provision of environmental education has had clear effects on Swedish society, with the nation operating at an ecological surplus of 3.4 global hectares. And this is in stark comparison to the negative 4.5 and negative 2.4 global hectares that the US and China respectively operate at. What this shows us is that Swedish society has been geared towards living sustainably, towards consuming within its means and not overburdening its environment. Proof of the powerful effect that education can have in changing attitudes and behaviors. However, this path towards a more sustainable future is a long and hard one, and not only that, it requires enough of us to make that shift. Because 10 people not using plastic bags isn't going to solve our wastage problem. It requires enough of us to make those changes in our lifestyle and then sustain that momentum until nations become wholly self-sustaining and hopefully reverse the effects of climate change. And education can do more than just change attitudes and behaviors. Education can save lives. Education can end discrimination. Be it of race, religion, or sexual orientation, education can fundamentally make the world a much less divisive place. Our current efforts have not been enough. Invading foreign land, drone strikes, data surveillance, spies. I'm not saying our current efforts are useless, but rather they aren't enough. Our current methods have been reactionary and aggressive, but why let that hate and violence fester? Why can't we prevent it in the first place? Taking a quote from Obama, ideologies are not defeated by guns, but new ideas. Education can bring these new ideas. Deporting refugees, clamping down on people's rights, building a wall, these aren't going to solve our problems. All it does is further split our already dichotomous society. And this toxic environment is exactly what breeds discrimination. An isolated and prejudiced migrant population. A middle class reeling from the effects of globalization and outsourcing. Coupled with a society that refuses to empathize with their plight. That ostracizes them based on their alien culture. That forces upon them our liberal ideals. Together this breeds a toxic us against them mentality. And if you think I speak in rhetoric, look at Molenbeek in Belgium. Over 80% migrant population, 25% youth unemployment, home to the 4 Paris attackers, 2 of the Belgian airport bombers, amongst a whole other slew of young men and women that have gone to Syria to fight. Look how split the US is over the election of President Trump. Left-leaning coastal cities against right-leaning middle America. As long as youth all around the world experience feelings of prejudice and alienation, they will continue to seek alternatives, becoming susceptible to discriminatory views and violent radicalization. So how can education solve this? By changing children's opinions from a young age to be more tolerant and inclusive, we can begin to show them that no one culture, ideology, or religion is inherently superior to the other. Education has the power to promote a culture of learning from difference rather than judging on difference. And discrimination also often stems from a lack of economic opportunity. But in providing a quality education, we can impart to them the right skills and knowledge so they can hold and create stable jobs. And again, if you think I speak in rhetoric, let me give you an example growing up in Singapore, because I don't want to bombard you with stats and figures. So living here during my schooling years, there's always been a strong emphasis on racial harmony. It's been our strength and even our point of pride. We have social studies classes, and every morning we repeat the pledge, repeating the phrase, regardless of race, language, or religion. But things didn't really come to hit until I transferred into an international school. Here, there's a smorgasbord of various cultures, nationalities, and races, and it was essential that we get along. And we did. Because one of our core values was internationalism, and we also had a class called Religious Moral Education, during which we were exposed to different cultures and different value systems and religions from all around the world. And what this did was open up our little minds to new perspectives, new viewpoints. It taught us that we can learn from difference instead of judging on difference. And one lesson stuck with me in particular, and it was on the Truth and Reconciliation Council in South Africa, dealing with the atrocities of apartheid. Now, while this lesson focused on the way a nation healed, all I could think about was the amount of pain and destruction that institutionalized discrimination can inflict on a community. And it was here I began to realize why we were learning about this in the first place, so that we can prevent such mistakes from ever occurring again. That we had a duty to prevent such pain from ever being inflicted again. What we do with diversity education isn't just to change individual attitudes and behaviors. What we're doing here is change the very psyche of society. If we can begin to introduce this to schools everywhere, we can begin to breed a culture of tolerance and inclusivity. And as more and more individuals are raised with these values, we begin to reach a tipping point where it becomes a societal norm to be culturally tolerant and inclusive. Isn't that something we all aspire to reach? To be global citizens, not to be separated, bounded, and typified into our stereotypes. Some will say that my dreams of education solving this are far-fetched, crazy, idealistic, and yes, there's so many things that contribute toward a nation's harmony. Yet I pose you this question. Is there any harm in inculcating the right values to our children? Is there any harm in trying? After all, there's already failings in our system. Is it not time to seek more holistic alternatives? So you must be wondering, what can I do to help? And it's simple. School events such as UN Day, Earth Day, or Mix It Up Day, my favorite. It's a simple lunchtime program run in schools all around the US, designed to mix up the seating arrangement in the lunchroom to promote interaction between different members of the social community. And the effects have been overwhelmingly positive. 95% of students said the program prompted them to interact with people outside their normal social circles. 92% said it increased awareness about its social boundaries, and 79% said it heightened their sensitivity towards tolerance and social justice issues. We don't need to wait for nations to adopt official frameworks, for schools to implement new syllabuses, for textbooks to be rewritten. Learning occurs every day. And if we can begin to educate those around us on the issues of today, and they go on to educate others, that is the first step in the right direction. Education is a loop, a feedback system of the world that can collectively solve the problems of discrimination and climate change amongst a whole slew of other things. Not only that, but it fuels itself as more educated individuals see the importance of education on themselves and they advocate for education for the next generation, allowing these ideas and values to snowball until we hit critical mass. Education is the engine that drives us to a greener future. Education is the antidote to the disease of discrimination. Education is the architect to the monumental task of progress. And this critical mass of well-educated individuals, it is the very element required to kickstart and sustain the very fast of change. Thank you.